If you are hearing these words right now, then something in you has already begun to shift. Quietly, subtly, but undeniably. You didn't find this message by accident, and you're not here because of an algorithmic coincidence. You're here because a deeper part of you is finally awake enough to receive what your unconscious has been trying to communicate for months, maybe years. Carl Jung believed that the psyche places the right symbol, the right challenge, the right message in front of us the moment we are ready to step into a new phase of consciousness. So if you feel a strange calm rising in your body, or a chill moving across your skin, or an indescribable sense that you've heard something like this before, even though you haven't, don't ignore it. This is not just a video. This is a mirror held up to your inner life, and the fact that you are here means the universe has quietly decided that you're ready to see what most people will never see about themselves. Let me ask you something that your mind has probably tried to avoid. Do you feel like the person you used to be simply doesn't fit anymore? As if your own life has become too small for you? The conversations you used to tolerate now feel shallow. The roles you used to play feel like outdated scripts. The dreams you once chased no longer feel like they belong to you. People who once felt central in your life now feel strangely far away, not because they changed, but because you did. This feeling isn't burnout. It's not moodiness. It's not you being dramatic. Jung would call it the first whisper of individuation, the soul urging you to step into your authentic identity. The unconscious begins the transformation long before the conscious mind understands what's happening, sometimes with a dream that feels like a message, sometimes with a coincidence that feels too precise to be random. Jung called these synchronicities moments when the outer world aligns with the inner world so perfectly that you can't dismiss it as luck. These moments are invitations. The question is, have you accepted the call? Acceptance doesn't happen through a declaration or a decision. It happens through curiosity. Something in you started paying attention differently. You began to feel a quiet pull away from the noise, away from the roles that once defined you. Not a dramatic withdrawal, but a subtle distancing from conversations that loop in empty circles, from relationships built on convenience rather than truth, from expectations that no longer feel like they belong to your spirit. And sometimes that distancing feels like loneliness. It feels like something is wrong. But Jung would tell you that nothing is wrong. The old version of you has completed its task. The psyche must empty the inner space before something real can be born. So if you felt isolated, misunderstood, bored with your old identity, or unable to tolerate certain behaviors or dynamics anymore, this isn't a breakdown. It's a breakthrough in progress. Every human being creates a persona, a mask that allows them to survive society. The persona helps you fit in, stay safe, and belong. But eventually, if you outgrow it, the mask becomes too heavy to wear. You may have experienced smiling when your heart felt numb, agreeing with something that violated your truth, shrinking yourself to avoid conflict, pleasing others to avoid being abandoned, pretending to be okay when you were quietly collapsing inside. These behaviors were not weaknesses. They were survival strategies. But there comes a moment, always unexpected, when the unconscious cracks the mask. Jung said the collapse of the persona is one of the most sacred psychological initiations in a person's life. It is the universe whispering, "You cannot live as a character in your own story anymore." That transition is painful because the persona helped you feel accepted. When it dissolves, you are left with the rawness of who you are beneath all the expectations. But what emerges afterward is infinitely stronger: authenticity. Then comes the stage most people avoid for their entire lives: meeting the shadow. Your shadow is not your darkness. It is everything you are not allowed to express. The anger you were told was inappropriate. The sadness you were taught to hide. The ambition that made others uncomfortable. The truth that threatened the stability of those around you. The talent that made someone feel insecure. The boundaries you never learned to set. The shadow rises not gently but urgently. It appears as emotional waves that seem to come from nowhere: irritation, grief, sudden exhaustion, a deep need to change your life. Most people run at this point, but you didn't. You stayed. You listened to the pain instead of numbing it. You allowed yourself to see the abandoned parts of you, not with judgment, but with curiosity. You began to understand that the shadow isn't here to punish you. It's here to complete you. Jung believed that integrating the shadow is one of the rarest and most courageous acts of consciousness. When you stop fighting your own unconscious, something extraordinary happens. Your inner world begins to reorganize itself. Emotions don't feel like enemies anymore. They feel like messages. Intuition sharpens, not because it's suddenly stronger, but because the internal noise has finally quieted. You begin to sense the energy behind people's words. You hear what is not being said. You feel the emotional temperature of rooms. You recognize patterns, not intellectually, but instinctively. Your dreams become vivid and symbolic. Your inner voice becomes clearer. Your choices feel guided by something deeper than logic. This isn't magic. It's psychological coherence. You're no longer operating from fragments. You're operating from wholeness. And when that happens, the outer world responds. People you once felt connected to feel strangely distant. Some become defensive because your transformation exposes their stagnation. Some feel drawn to you because your authenticity grants them permission to be more honest with themselves. Some pull away, not because they dislike you, but because your presence reveals truths they aren't ready to confront. This isn't rejection. This is resonance. Jung said a psychologically integrated person becomes a mirror. Without meaning to, you show people who they are. That is why some love you, some fear you, and some misunderstand you, but none of it is personal. There comes a moment in this journey when the opinions of others lose their grip on your identity. You stop shaping yourself to be acceptable. Instead, you start shaping your life to be true. You ask not, will they approve? But, does this align with my soul? Your decisions slow down. Your reactions soften. Your patience deepens. You stop chasing. You stop forcing. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You begin to trust your inner authority, what Jung called the self, the deepest organizing principle of your psyche. When the self becomes the center of your life, everything changes. Relationships shift. Old habits dissolve. New opportunities appear as if out of nowhere. You begin experiencing synchronicities more frequently. Those uncanny alignments that feel like the universe is whispering, keep going. But there is always a final test. After a moment of awakening, the ego tries to pull you back into the familiar. It whispers, "Maybe nothing changed. Maybe I imagined the growth. Maybe I should return to who I used to be." But here is the truth. Once you have tasted authenticity, pretending becomes unbearable. You cannot go back to sleep after you've learned how it feels to be awake. Your body knows the difference between comfort and truth. Your heart knows the difference between belonging and attachment. Your silence knows the difference between peace and avoidance. So you begin to live from a deeper center. You listen more and react less. You value presence over performance. You attract instead of pursue. You observe instead of absorbing. You set boundaries not from anger, but from clarity. You honor your emotions as signals, not threats. You no longer abandon yourself for the sake of harmony. And this new version of you does not need approval, permission, or validation. It simply exists, and that existence alone shifts the atmosphere of any room you enter. People feel calmer around you, more honest, more aware. Some also feel exposed or uncomfortable because your presence invites their own truth to emerge. This is the subtle power of individuation. Without trying to lead anyone, you become a living reminder of what it looks like to be whole. Jung believed that when a person embodies their true self, they step into an archetype, the inner guide, the quiet teacher, the grounded witness. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your presence, your clarity, your sincerity, your ability to remain centered even when everything around you is shifting. And if you have felt detached from the old, drawn to the deeper, awakened in your intuition, cracked open in your emotions, alive in your silence, or wise in ways you cannot logically explain, then understand this. You didn't stumble into this moment. You crossed a threshold. The universe reveals certain truths only when a person is ready to hold them without collapsing. You are not at the beginning of your transformation anymore. You are already in it. You have already survived the cracking of the persona. You have already listened to the whispers of the shadow. You have already stepped into alignment with your deeper self. And everything in your life, your relationships, your desires, your boundaries, your vision, will begin to reflect that shift. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And becoming who you truly are is not a single moment of revelation. It's a continuous unfolding, a sacred returning to the self you abandoned to survive." So if you are hearing this, and something in you feels recognized rather than inspired, understand that this message is not telling you what to become. It is telling you what you already are. You are ready. You are capable. You are awakening. Not loudly, but deeply. Not suddenly, but irrevocably. And from this moment on, the universe will show you things you couldn't see before, not because they weren't there, but because now you finally are.